They're here, aren't they?
Mr. Mulder, they've been here for a long, long time.
I recognize one of these names. It's in an X-file.
X-file?
Yes, unsolved cases. I file them under X.
Why don't you file them under U for unsolved?
That's what I did until I ran out of room. Plenty of room in the X's.
In the beginning, I didn't think of the episodes as specifically as mythology episodes because they were just stories we wanted to tell, and they involved Mulder and his personal quest and ultimately Scully. And what happened is that through the telling of those stories, we saw that the most personal episodes became the mythology episodes, the ones that were about his life ultimately became about the relationship between Mulder and Scully, and she became very involved in his life. And they were really, I think of them as the most romantic episodes in the show because it was where the characters really learned most about one another.
Part of the reason the mythology unfolded the way it did was because we were afraid of the pretentiousness of a quote-unquote mythology, and so things were always oblique. There were always lots of questions asked.
Agent Mulder, I'm Dana Scully. I've been assigned to work with you.
Chris, from the very beginning, had an idea about what the end of the show was, where it was all going. But he was smart enough to be flexible about the path the mythology would take over the life of the series. So that if you had a new idea, if something broke in the news or you found it in a magazine or newspaper, if an actor ended up being wonderful, the mythology could go in a different direction and still have that sort of floating destination out on the horizon. I realized just how wise that approach was as the series went on and on and on.
What am I onto?
A dangerous path.
To a certain degree, it was a good thing that people couldn't quite understand the mythology. Because when you start talking about little green men and flying saucers, it could sound ridiculous very quickly. So the more shadowy, complex, intellectual, high-minded these things seem, the more plausible they seem.
It wasn't a show for dummies. It was a thinking man's show. You had to sit down and give this some real thought. And you had to pay attention. If you didn't pay attention, you'd get lost. And I think that was part of the charm of the show.
The important thing for us was not relying on the audience remembering a past episode or having seen a past episode, but rather, in the beginning of a mythology episode, restating in some way what we felt you needed to know to go forward.
I'm a federal agent.
Hold on, you're not going anywhere till we can see some ID.
There is no time for this. A man is dying.
What happened to me out on the ice has justified every belief. If I should die now, it will be with the certainty that my faith has been righteous. And if through death larger mysteries are revealed, I will have already learned the answer to the question that has driven me here. That there is intelligent life in the universe other than our own. That they are here among us.
One thing people don't often think about with the mythology episodes was that they were really our only chance to advance the emotional lives and the personal lives of the characters of Mulder and Scully. In all the standalone episodes, they were essentially static. You know, they were about the case, they were plot-driven. And these were the episodes when you met their parents, met their siblings, learned about their childhood. You know, they were the personal stories. And I think that's as much a part of their appeal as the big stuff about aliens and the spectacle of the production values.
It was a little bit more of a soap opera or an opera. It had that quality of being part of a larger canvas. So in some ways it was permitted to ask more questions than it answered, whereas in a single standalone episode, you really have to be kind of cohesive and end it there.
Most people, if they tuned in on that Friday night and turned it on and it was a monster movie, they go, oh, wow, cool. I wish it was a mythology one, though. Because the mythology ones always went deeper with the audience, I believe. They did for me.
They like to be scared by the monsters of the week, but it was the mythology shows that actually hooked them.
I said put your hands against the wall!
What's wrong?
Do it!
Scully, it's me.
I don't know who you are.
Okay, I'm gonna take my left hand and reach into my pocket and get my ID, okay? Just don't shoot me. I got shot once and I didn't much care.
I said keep your hands up.
The mythology shows took on a whole new kind of level of expectation from a production point of view.
Generally, they had a slightly larger scope in the writing, and so that they did take in bigger themes, and thus they had to have bigger visuals involved in them.
I used a different film stock for those. I used 5293 for those because there's generally a lot of smoke, and it worked well with 93. It worked well for me, and that was a more, sort of a darker stock.
My choice for the mythology shows musically was to have the same sort of palette of sounds, which would be more of perhaps a traditional orchestral sound, albeit done on electronics. So whenever a mythology show came up, I would just go back and pull up that particular palette, using that, as if it was a traditional symphony orchestra setup.
I was 12 when it happened. My sister was 8. She just disappeared out of her bed one night. Just gone. Vanished. No note, no phone calls, no evidence of anything.
One of the advantages of Vancouver is that it's a very eclectic architectural environment. There is not a theme, a consistent theme downtown. And within 20 or 30 minutes, you can go from lush, lost forest to farm.
The Vancouver mist and rain and fog and forests and the variety of neighborhoods and terrain and landscape that you could shoot in, it was all wonderful for the show.
This is a shadowy land. I think X-Files was a shadowy show.
Because of the fog and the overcast conditions a lot of the time, rain, it maintained a bit of a Sherlock Holmes feel to it for me, right? And I think John definitely found the voice of the show very, very quickly and his way to do it.
I love doing dark work and pulling it off, particularly for television. You have to have something either to take the audience away, something bright in the background, or something hidden away, or not stay on darkness for too long. You can't be too black. As somebody says, darkness and blackness. So you can have darkness, but you can't have blackness.
Actually, I'm looking forward to working with you. I've heard a lot about you.
Oh, really? I was under the impression that you were sent to spy on me.
Early on, everyone sort of took a part in helping to shape that mythology. But it all sprung from, really, the pilot episode and the episode right after it, which is called Deep Throat, which really sets up the idea that the aliens have been here, and they, as the character of Deep Throat says, they've been here for a long, long time. That really, I think, is the sort of launching moment for the entire mythology, that the government knows something. They've known it quite a while, and they've done a good job of keeping it a secret, and it's Mulder now whose quest is to unravel that secret, to expose that secret.
Mr. Mulder, why are those like yourself who believe in the existence of extraterrestrial life on this earth not dissuaded by all the evidence to the contrary?
Because all the evidence to the contrary is not entirely dissuasive.
Precisely.
The whole idea of the show is really about this quest to find the truth about his sister and possibly find his sister. So the idea of a mythology is kind of built into the show because Mulder's quest takes him far and wide and into the paranormal. So I really think of every episode as a mythology episode in a sense. But then there are these episodes that really become about that specific quest, which is the search for his sister. The episodes that involve specifically the truth about alien extraterrestrial life and the possibility that his sister was abducted by aliens.
The quest for finding her, that she is out there and we have a lost child. I mean, we could lose a child now, and there's an Amber Alert, and the whole nation knows when one child's missing. And it's a worrisome thing.
You never found her.
Tore the family apart. No one would talk about it. There were no facts to confront, nothing to offer any hope.
Mulder's main motivation in season 1 was uncovering the secret about his missing sister. And that was really, I think, what drove season 1 and certainly the entire mythology of the X-Files. Was the basis, was Samantha Mulder.
I had asked Morgan and Wong, Glenn Morgan and James Wong, to write the first episode coming back in the second season, and this is what they chose to do simply, and that was just taking something that had been established, which is the idea that Mulder's sister possibly was abducted, and using it in an interesting way, and taking something like Arecibo, which is in that episode, and taking something that existed, something that was real, which is what made the best episodes really click, taking the literature, if you will, of the search for extraterrestrials and wrapping it around, contextually around the Mulder and Scully story.
The abductions were often, in the first season in particular, and then into the beginning of the second season, very intimated, very kind of off camera. You'd see the result of an abduction, you'd see the footprint of an alien, and in fact, we thought that was the secret of the show. That was what was, wonderful about the show, that for a very limited special effects budget, we could actually scare people with what you didn't see rather than what you saw. And I think sometime in the middle of the second season, the abductions and aliens became a much more graphically rendered thing. You'd see the aliens on camera, and as we got more money, we could show it.
The mythology of the series, it didn't really blossom until an unexpected event late in season 1, which was the pregnancy of Gillian Anderson, the real-life pregnancy of Gillian Anderson, which forced the X-Files to be serialized in a way I don't think it was ever intended to be serialized. Suddenly, there had to be an arc of stories that dealt with the fact that Scully was going to be gone for who knew how many episodes.
There was talk of actually making her have an alien baby, which would have been a terrible idea. And so what we ultimately decided to do was to shoot around her pregnancy and her pregnant stomach. What we did is we had Scully abducted during the two-parter of Duane Barry and Ascension, and then she went off and had her baby, and she came back.
We knew we had a window where we had to write her out, and, fortunately, this was a show about abduction, so we abducted her.
It was sort of a happy accident. And there's a beautiful irony in all that, because ultimately Gillian Anderson's real-life pregnancy leads to the storyline about Scully not being able to have a baby, and then miraculously by the end of the series having a child. And all of that is a piece, and it's a wonderful sort of blur of real life and fiction, because it was all... one would not have happened without the other. If Gillian Anderson had not had Piper in season 1 of the X-Files, the show never would have evolved the way it did. When it came time to write the season finale for season 7, Requiem, there was a very good chance it was the last season of the show. David Duchovny had announced he was done. But there was some pretty strong sentiment inside and outside the show that it was time to call it a day. So we very consciously went back to the pilot episode, to the characters of the pilot episode, Billy Miles and the Sheriff, and brought them back for that, to come full circle from where we'd been. But we felt it was an appropriate ending to have Mulder abducted. And that idea came very early on in the writing of the story.
Sit down! How'd you find... Shut up!
Prior to that, the cigarette-smoking man was kind of a dark figure who sort of lurked around in the shadows and didn't do much more than smoke cigarettes. I mean, he really didn't have much dialogue prior to that. And, to be truthful with you, I didn't know if Bill Davis, I didn't know. I mean, I later learned he was an incredible actor. He teaches acting, has an acting school, but at that time, I didn't know anything. All I knew was he was a guy that would run in to smoke cigarettes. So here we had this incredible scene where Mulder comes into the apartment with the gun to his head, and basically, he's going to blow him away because he's sure that he had to do something to do with Scully's disappearance. And Bill was fantastic.
But there were two characters in the cigarette-smoking man. There was the cigarette-smoking man played by the actor Bill Davis, and then there was the cigarette. And if you'll watch closely, again, this is Iota Rob Bowman, he knew that cigarette was its own character. And the lighter could also become a character. And you could tell a story just by a little smoke in the foreground. You didn't even have to see Bill yet, right? And you knew. It was like the downbeat and Mark Snow had come in, You knew something was... This was not going to be good because the cigarette smoke was there.
And he knew exactly when he did it. And he would do the first take, and he would take a puff, and he'd talk a bit, and then do the blowing out at a certain time. And the second take, I would be keeping track of the puffs when he'd puff. So cut, print, moving on, Helga, print, take 2 and 4. And I would go up to him and say, so we're printing take 2, and he'd go, when did I first puff? I'd tell him the word, and he would match himself perfectly.
He was the Darth Vader of the X-Files. Again, like so many things on the X-Files, everything that was given birth seemed to be given birth because it was an accident almost. And now suddenly this man who was nothing more than an extra leaning against a file cabinet became the lead villain in the show.
Survived the extreme Arctic temperatures. The man was airlifted to a military hospital in Alaska, where he was listed in stable condition. But while authorities have been trying to determine just who the pilot is, we've learned that he has apparently walked out of the hospital and is now listed as missing. Reporting from our field office.
By I'd say the sort of middle of season 2, when you get Colony and Endgame, is the first time you really get episodes that are specifically written for and dedicated to this mythology, this quest. What happens in the middle of season 2 is the writing staff starts to change and certain people leave the show, and we are now at a point where I've got this mythology and I want to pump it up a little bit, and so I bring someone on the show named Frank Spotnitz.
I had an idea that ended up being central to that two-parter, as had David Duchovny. We kind of combined those ideas to make the two-parter.
What's nice about having a person like David Duchovny to work with is that he's smart and he's got good ideas. The idea for Colony and Endgame came out of David Duchovny saying, wouldn't it be great if we had like an alien bounty hunter?
I know that internally on the show, among the writing staff, there was a lot of, I would say, resistance, but uncertainty about whether this was a wise direction to go in. Up to that point, the aliens had been very shadowy, ambiguous. You weren't really sure whether they existed at all. And here we had this Terminator-ish figure of Brian Thompson, who played the bounty hunter, and he had this alien weapon, this alien stiletto, and it was very explicit that there was something going on.
Well, my interpretation of the bounty hunter was that he was incredibly efficient, that he was the alien version of Mr. Duchovny. He was looking for aliens on the planet Earth, and he was trying to do his job as efficiently as possible.
David and Chris's thinking was that it was time to advance, to go forward, and to be bold about it and not shy away from, this too belonged to this show. And, obviously it seemed to have been the right decision.
Nowhere I ever expected.
What do you mean?
I'm in a boxcar, buried inside a quarry. There are bodies everywhere.
Bodies?
Stacked floor to ceiling.
What happened to them?
I don't know.
I had taken a trip at the end of season 1. I was very tired, and my summer vacation, as it were, was to Sedona, Arizona. I would see a lot of literature about the Anasazi, which is an Indian culture that just completely disappeared. And that was a culture that had created images that looked like they were extraterrestrial images.
Nothing vanishes without a trace. Burn it!
But David was very instrumental in, I think, shaping the mythology. He was involved in the story for Anasazi as well, which is the end of season 2, which was a big cliffhanger for us because it looks like Mulder is dead, and it brought a lot of interest to the show. How can you do this? How can you kill the lead character? Will you kill the lead character? You killed such an important character at the end of season 1. You're not going to do this to us again, are you? So I think it heightened the interest in the show, and David was instrumental in coming up with that idea.
Realizing that I could write, always thinking of myself as a writer, and then putting my money where my mouth was and writing and realizing that that's an alternative for me in my life, and that's something I want to pursue, which is invaluable to me and such a great opportunity and a gift to have been able to do it on the show and then directing the same.
At the end of each episode, I was asked by the person who sort of watched over us at the network if I could tie up each episode each week with a bow, in a sense, that I could explain the paranormal phenomena, that I could tell people that this was real and this is why it was real. And it was just a crazy idea. And I kept saying the interesting part about this, for me, was going to be telling stories where you left people wondering at the end, and with the possibility that it could be real, but never ever stating that this is in fact the truth.
That's your sister's file.
Yeah,
What are you looking for?
I don't know. Look at this, Scully. This file was originally mine.
I don't understand.
In Paperclip, we really begin to realize the extent of the government conspiracy and the cataloging of all of us. This is where Chris first introduced the idea of genetic material being taken through inoculations. What's great about that idea is that it touches on something that everybody's done, everybody's been forced to do since we were children, get inoculated for something or other, for smallpox in this case. And to turn that into something scary is brilliant, I think, because that really means you can't trust anyone.
The first time you ever really saw a spaceship on the show, and how do you do it? Do you want to do it in your face, or do you want to be a little more coy about it? And this dark mass starts appearing behind the building, and Mulder looks up at it. He sees this dark mass, and suddenly the brightness of it is so overwhelming that you can't distinguish it that way. It's like it was so dark you can't see it, then suddenly it's so bright that you can't see it. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It was really the first time our mythology started to take on that kind of a science fiction feel